Which is what if Naruto was a Greek Demigoddess Jinchūriki feared by gods and shinobi? Part 1. Sending a quick prayer to her divine parents to reassure them, because in her critical state she could hear their voices, her mama saying to hold on, that a woman was able to take more pain than a man and how cute her little granddaughter was. But even that calm was a facade, poorly hiding how worried she was. Her papa was projecting his image, sitting on his throne, his trident clenched into his right hand, his sea-green eyes burning with power, with the desire to be there, to get rid himself of the madman who attacked his family but unable to due to the ancient laws and the fact that he was incapable to manifest himself into Konoha. He was telling her that he was boosting her Uzumaki regeneration to make her hold on to life until help would arrive, telling her to beg for water. Into the waters of life, she would be safe, into the waters of life, she would live to see another day and heal to go back to her daughter. She followed Hiruzen as quickly as possible, but she was near death and giving birth about a week ago. That had taken a lot on her, even with her demigod nature and Uzumaki life force. It would take time to get back to her previous level of fitness. The professor was astute enough to slow his pace down for Kushina's sake, giving a kind smile and returning the salutes of the villagers who walked past them. Of course, Hiruzen might have followed Minato's dying wish and told the populace of the sacrifice his daughter had made for them, but why reveal her own secret when there's no need? As they walked, he talked into a low voice. I thought about giving your daughter only your surname. Minato made a considerable number of enemies during the Third War. I wouldn't want an Iwa stone. The 5 great villages' names are often shortened. Assassin trying to cash a bounty upon Naruto's head. I know that you have enemies of your own, Kami. Believe me, but Minato was always more high profile than the Yondaime Hokage, 4th Fire Shadow, and the Kuroi Senko, the Yellow Flash, Minato's bingo book moniker, but the decision will be yours. As it is, I already passed a decree forbidding the current generation to pass what happened with the Kyuubi, 9 tails, to the next, on pain of death. Only you, I and little Naruto when she's old enough to understand will have the permission to reveal this information. Kushina knew the old monkey was doing his best to make sure the village recovers quickly and a stop-gap on the sensitive information was a must in this instance. They were a military-oriented village after all. Civilians could moan and bitch all they wanted, the Hokage was the ultimate authority in Konoha. His word was law. Kushina though Uncle Zeus-sama could learn a few tricks from Hiruzen. In her head, she heard the low chuckle from her father. Seems he was piggybacking in her mind for a while longer. She usually doesn't mind, it was funny to have a secret conversation and on the god's side, he was watching the world through a mortal's eyes. Though he usually get out of there quickly when she was feeling amorous. That though hit her hard and made her shed a few tears. Her husband was gone. She wasn't a weak woman or anything like a princess waiting for her knight in shining armor. She was an independent woman and a serious and competent kunoichi, female ninja, but Minato was the love of her life. It was okay to mourn, but she mustn't forget to live, for her daughter's sake at least. They were quickly hushed inside a bland building which doesn't attire the attention once they arrived at destination. After both being submitted to a chakra signature check-up by a censor to be sure they were who they were, Hiruzen and Kushina were ushered toward the nursery. As quick as she could with her soreness and her exhaustion, Kushina burst into the room, creating a few adamantine ceiling chains to throw a poor Kakashi out of her way and precipitated herself toward the crib in which her baby girl was sleeping. Losing control over her emotions, she took Naruto into her arms, pressed her against her bosoms, then slid sitting to the ground as soon as she was against the wall. Kushina was crying in relief to at last have her baby into her arms. She almost went to Uncle Hades-sama's realm to join her husband. She almost lost her chance to be a mother. She lost her husband. By the gods, she was a wreck. But at least, she was a live wreck. She could rebuild herself in time. Taking hold of herself and seeing as the ANBU Ninja Black Ops operative, and the Hokage had given her some time to grieve, she looked closely at her precious daughter. She was beautiful. The light blonde fuzz on her head showed her that she had inherited Minato's hair. Her pale skin showed that she would be fair-skinned for a while. Her chubby cheeks were marked with whiskers like birthmarks, a sign of being born from a female Jinchūriki and being with Kurama in her womb for a 10 months pregnancy. Her eyes weren't settled yet, she was too young. Moving the blanket she was covered with and opening her footy pajama, she saw the seal tattooed on her stomach. It would fade when her chakra circulatory system would start to filter young Kurama's chakra into her body. For Kushina, it didn't matter. Naruto was alive, healthy and whole. Everything else could wait. Seeing her daughter fussing and going for her, she was about to loosen her blouse when she heard it. It, being the sound of perverted giggling. If she didn't know better, she would swear that Uncle Zeus-sama faded and then reincarnated into Jiraiya. She was praying every deity she knew of, from order and chaos to Athena's owl, Glaucus, to not let them meet. The apocalypse resulting of the unity and bromance of the super perverts was not something the world could endure in her humble opinion. That thought earned her a deep belly laugh from her father and the uncontrollable giggling of her mother. Considering seriously between beating Jiraiya to a pulp and feeding her daughter, she chose the latter. With a smile so pure and innocent toward the hidden Jiraiya that it was anything but, she then showed a skill that she managed only before her pregnancy became too advanced for any taxing jutsus. She disappeared in a yellow flash of light. Flabbergasted, Jiraiya dropped his invisibility jutsu and stared where the wife of his deceased student stood a second ago with his goddaughter. In a forlorn voice, he then asked aloud, "I'm screwed, aren't I?" Quote. Hiruzen and the ANBU all nodded. The toad hermit then let out a high-pitched whine and after started to complain. "It's not fair. I was so close to see her, then she decided to be a tease and ditch me. It could have been a beautiful scene into my next book. A mother who give her child her love. No, better work it out a bit more him." Jiraiya sat there a while, mumbling to himself, obvious to anything else. Kakashi, having recovered by being tossed away like a rag doll, was the last one to let the perverted hermit to his thoughts. He also could grieve when he could take the time to do it. They still had to clear the rubble left by the attack of the Kyuubi, count and bury their dead and rebuild. Also make a strong front for their rivals. It wouldn't do to let them know that they were weakened. Even with his personal loss, he firmly believes into the will of fire. The will of fire is an ideal, a belief that love is the key to peace. For each and every shinobi, the village must come first. The entire village is your family and you always protect family. After all, peace is an ideal worth working towards it. What no one knew, not even Kushina, was the fact that Konoha was so much focused on the will of fire. It gave enough strength to Hestia to give reassurances and feeling of home to each and every hearth. Time passes far too quickly when you are the mother of an enthusiastic and full of energy toddler, which were Kushina's thoughts. After taking the time to heal from her brush with death and from giving birth, she was mightily surprised that she could still bear children. After all, Kurama's claw plowed trough her womb. Maybe the situation was dire enough for Artemis-sama to intervene. She was the goddess of childbirth after all. Well, no matter. It's not like there was a line of candidates to choose for, and to be frank, she was not over Minato quite yet. After thinking deeply about her situation and seeing the cold wrath of the village simmering by seeing the reminder of what they lost every other day, even if it was mitigated by the fact that the girl was the daughter of their beloved Yondaime Hokage, she decided to pack and head out back toward Uzu. What she never told any living soul on Delos, was the fact that she has contracted supernatural architects from the gods, home to restore the civilian villages to make the archipelago flourish once more. It cost her all her stash of drachmas and quite a few favors, but with the help of Poseidon's court, everything was done for a reasonable price. It seems that the residents of Atlantis wanted their vacation hotspot back. And if it gave Amphitrite and Poseidon the chance to visit their daughter and their granddaughter at the same time, well, they would take the plunge. Uzushiogakure no Sato would never be brought back. That hidden village was destroyed because of fear of what they could do if they started a campaign to extend their territory. Thus, to be the devil's advocate, the Uzumaki were crazy with some seals. One made to call the aid of Thanatos-sama is something not done every day. Though, even if Hiruzen let them go, she did have to swear on the river Styx to come back with Naruto to Konoha when she would be 12 years old to enroll her into the Konoha Shinobi Corps. Her word was good, but as Hokage, he needed something to ensure that one of his best kunoichis would come back to active service. Naruto was to be a kunoichi after all. It was impossible to not enroll her, with her pedigree and the fact that she was a Jinchūriki was marking her as a human weapon even if she would not be treated like that. It was a sad fact that a leader had to make difficult decisions, sometimes even impossible ones. A shinobi was a human being but also weapon of the village it serves. It's funny how fate works, because Hitomi Hyuga, one of her best friends growing up in Konoha, was with her in Uzu no Kuni, on the main island, with her young daughter Hinata, who was making fast friends with Naruto and the locals' children. The kidnap attempt by the ambassador of Kumo Cloud sent to Konoha to sign a peace treaty was foiled and exposed. The head ninja was captured when he tried to break into the house housing Hiyashi and his family. Of course, nobody told the would-be kidnapper that all he would find into that house was Hiyashi and his younger twin brother, Hizashi, accompanied by his young son Neji, putting the past behind them and trying to move forward as a united family once more. It would be an understatement to say that being interrupted was not a good thing. Once the intruder was hit with the gentle fist style to the point of closing forcefully all his chakra coils, he was knocked out, forcefully bound and dragged to the torture and interrogation department headed by Ibiki Morino. Another though hit her, tried to arrange a meeting between Uncle Hades-sama and Ibiki to let them trade torture tips. They would get along fabulously. Needless to say that the guy spilled the beans, but due to his ambassador status, they couldn't just execute him and be done with it. No, they had to make Kumo own up for what they tried to pull. Needless to say, the peace treaty did not remain, but after cooler heads prevailed, they concluded a détente. The "you stay out of my way, I'll do the same" kind of deal. It was good seeing Hitomi again though. Time was still passing and the wounds were healing, but when she tried to teach Naruto how to read, she discovered something unexpected. Something very startling that made her famous temper rise to the maximum. Her daughter, her precious and vivacious little Naruto, was a Greek demigod. She was dyslexic and hyperactive. The hyperactivity she first though it was her Uzumaki genes enhanced by Yonkarama's chakra filtering through her system since she was born. Her brain was hardwired for ancient Greek. She did a test with a text in Latin, just in case she was Roman. Yes, she was aware of the two castes of demigods. How could she not when she rescued one last year from drowning? How a son of Vulcan managed to get on Delos and to Uzu no Kuni, she had no idea. He didn't seem to have a clue either, poor guy. Until Lupa herself somehow showed up and came to take him back to Camp Jupiter. The funny thing is that as hardcore the wolf goddess could be, she totally fell in love with Naruto to the point of acting like a pet dog for her all day long. A wolf goddess playing fetch. Back to the subject at hand, don't get her wrong, she was glad to share something more with her child, but to find out that her husband had been a god and did not see fit to tell her when she told him she was a twice blessed demigod, daughter of Poseidon and Amphitrite, was making her very mad. Knowing that the gods were shapeshifters, she couldn't base herself on Minato's physique to deduce which god to strangle. She wasn't the kind of woman to which you conceive a child with then go to the next conquest. They had married legally and their union blessed by her parents, who promised to report it to Aunt Hara-sama. It doesn't make any sense. She has seen him bleed before. The fates only knew how many times she patched him up when he was working on a new seal or on that Rasengan spiraling sphere technique of his blood was red. A god blood was golden. She knew that, she had punched one in the face with Yin Kurama's chakra the other day because the jerk decided to cop a feel of her. The pact permitting immortals and mortals to live side by side in Uzu no Kuni was in exchange of respect given in true worship. The gods must take a physical aspect as close as human as possible and restrain themselves to the shinobi equal of their rank into Poseidon's court. The god she punched was somewhere in the middle since he was of Chunin level when she had given him a lesson he would not forget anytime soon. Well, having dealt with this as she was growing, she now knew how to teach her daughter. Yes, good plan. Teach Naruto how to read, and then plan for Minato's lesson. You don't want to tempt the anger of the red-hot habanero. If he was still with them, she would deny him for at least a month and would make him sleep on the couch. After he took his beating like a man, that is, you got to have your priorities straight. Beating first, no for a month, and sleeping on the couch, second. Somewhere on Olympus, Apollo suddenly stopped antagonizing Artemis, letting her slipping away. He sneezed violently and then started to shiver in fright. What in Tartarus? What could make his godly body react like that? Zeus was busier groveling to Hera's feet after siring another demigod and thus breaking his oath than nagging him about something. Uncle P was down there in Atlantis doing his kingly duties, and Uncle H was doing his undead thing down in the underworld. With the big three not on his case, who could frighten so much the strongest son of Zeus? Suddenly, he was engulfed into a halo of light, and out of it came Roman mode Apollo in a smart business suit. Smirking at the situation his other self was in, for he was remembering Kushina, but as she was his other side Greek wife with a Greek child, he was in the clear. He was Roman, yes, but even a man of his ego was not stupid enough to forget that woman. As a twice-blessed demigod of Poseidon and his wife, and a kunoichi of Delos to boot, not to mention mother of one of his precious daughters, she could make his immortal life very uncomfortable in the near future. Going straight to business, he then sent a message with his godly phone to Hermes, warning him of a really funny future event that would put Greek mode Apollo in really hot water. That would be an entertainment he wouldn't want to miss, and to please be sure to prepare to film it, then distribute copies of said film to both pantheons. Of course, he then paid in advance with a generous tip to do this service for a Roman and also to keep his mouth shut. Satisfied of his plot, he let Greek mode Apollo take back the driver's seat to wait patiently for the show that would be coming in a decade or so. Back on Delos, Uzu no Kuni, life was going pretty well. Naruto was really like a younger Kushina, but with Minato's coloring. She was just now running away after a successful prank. Kushina wasn't trying to curb it as so much to direct it. That was pure evasion training and critical thinking training. The consequences if she got caught were related to what would happen if she failed a mission in the future. By how colorful the people were as they were pursuing her, she must have set paint bombs or water balloons with paint. But wait, there was a real mob forming behind the few people pursuing her daughter. Frowning, she was about to use Shunshin body flicker technique, but when she saw the wild mop of white hair, she just knew it was Jiraiya who got caught trying to peep on the woman bathing in the hot springs. She was glad that her house here had indoor plumbing and Western-style doors with locks and a Western bath with a shower head. So Jiraiya was in town, huh? He was probably here because he wanted to see Naruto or to have an update on this quiet corner of the continent. She was glad that it was summer. The majority of the sea immortals came around in winter, and since the mist was outside the country, at large in the ocean, hiding them from the rest of the world, Pervy Sage would know something was going on with those strangers. She was in no mood to explain the world outside and the gods who were ruling it to him. She debated if she wanted to save him or not for a while, but her pondering was in vain, for Naruto redirected her pursuers towards Jiraiya by running toward him. Jiraiya was a tall man with waist-length, spiky white hair usually tied back into a ponytail, with two shoulder-length bangs that framed both sides of his face. He also had red lines that ran down from his eyes and wore a horned forehead protector with the kanji for oil, which denotes his affiliation with Mount Myoboku. He also had a noticeable wart on the left side of his nose. Jiraiya wore a green short shirt kimono and matching pants, under which he wore mesh armor that showed out of the sleeves and legs of his outfit. His outfit was completed with hand guards, a simple black belt, traditional Japanese getup wooden sandals, a red haori with two simple yellow circles on each side, and a scroll on his back. He also had a tattoo in his left palm. Once Naruto and her pursuers were in front of Jiraiya, the little girl gave him a vulpine smirk, jumped above his head, using it as a springboard with her feet, making him stumble and get caught by his own pursuers, while the child managed to run towards her mother. Jiraiya only had time to scowl, grumble about ill-mannered urchins before he was caught and start getting a beating. During that time, Kushina took Naruto home with her for her lessons. Well, as much as possible for her hyperactive 3-year-old daughter. In their walk back, she then prompted the girl to ignore Jiraiya's shouts of pain. That man was invincible, plain and simple. Maybe she could test his resistance by setting up to peep upon Artemis-sama or another goddess. Some time as a deer or another beast would do him good. Once a little further away from the mob and Jiraiya's punishment, she then prompted Naruto to deconstruct her prank. Once done, she then helped her realize what she did wrong and what she could have done better. Not to forget what she did right and prize her for a good result. It was important to give a child positive reinforcement after all. With a proud smile, Kushina made multiple passes with her hand into Naruto's growing blonde hair. Mommy loves you so much, Naruto. You are becoming more beautiful each day. She then proceeded to take her into her arms for cuddle time and a bunch of kisses on her cheeks and her neck, making the little girl giggle and laugh. A beautiful sound. When they arrived home, they realized that they had a visitor sitting serenely on a kitchen chair, sipping a cup of tea infused with a cloud of nectar. The man has black hair, a neatly trimmed black beard, a deep tan, and sea green eyes that were surrounded by sun crinkles that told one he was prone to smiling. His hands are also scarred like an old-time fisherman's. When casual, which is almost always, he wore Birkenstocks, leather sandals, khaki Bermuda shorts, a Tommy Bahama shirt with coconuts and parrots all over it, or any other Hawaiian shirt, and a cap decorated with fishing lures which says, Neptune's lucky fishing hat. When seeing him, Naruto's eyes got big and round. She let out a big happy squeal and yelled, "Granddad! Granddad! You came, you came!" She then took an accidental chakra-enhanced leap to run forwards into her smiling and laughing grandfather's arms that caught her easily. After a big happy belly laugh he then answered, "Of course I came. I couldn't not keep my promise to my little maelstrom, can I? I love this country. Great beaches, the ocean is clean, good fish to catch, the people are amazing and most of all, the family is always happy to see me." Kushina loved every moment of it and observed the scene with a big smile before walking to her father and deposing a big smooch on his cheek. Poseidon was a great father and a doting grandfather. Every time her father came to visit, her daughter would be excited. Something really clicked between them. They had complicity rarely seen between a god and a demigod. It would be a subject of conversation to talk about when Naruto would be in bed. No need to spoil this visit with something that's serious with Naruto too young to understand yet. Time wait for no one. It was a saying translated in many languages. Time did seem to be getting away quickly when you had fun. After an interesting visit from her grandfather, Naruto was put to bed at her designated bedtime. She was grumpy the next morning if she did not get enough sleep. Once in bed and asleep, Kushina partially closed the door and went back to the kitchen to continue to talk with her father. Seeing his daughter's grim face, he decided to be serious in turn. Once seated, Kushina was silent a few minutes and Poseidon did not prompt her to speak. If he had learned something in his long immortal life, it was patience. When she was ready, Kushina declared, "Naruto is a Greek demigod. Yes, I know about the Romans. I met and saved from drowning, last year, a son of Vulcan who was stranded by we don't know what and how, here. He stayed for a few days before the Roman wolf goddess Lupa somehow managed to come fetch him. It's not like the kid was a blabbermouth, but I'm a kunoichi and a mother. I know when children are lying. He wasn't a good liar either. To be fair, he was 13 years old and in front of a good-looking woman. From what he said, he was on patrol around Camp Jupiter in full gear and some sort of portal opened and he was pushed through only to fall into the water. You will really have to do something about that. I thought only you and the members of your court could come in Uzu no Kuni. Any others divine visitors needed your express permission before. I know Artemis, Leto and Apollo still have some influence on the mainland on Delos, but here on the archipelago. I tested Naruto with a text in Latin to see if she was Roman and she couldn't make head or tails out of it. Her ADHD could have been her Uzumaki genes boosted by her part of the nine-tailed fox sealed into her at birth. It was the dyslexia and her great difficulty to read the language of the elemental nations that told me the truth. But something doesn't fit. Minato has not reacted as if he knew what I was talking about when I revealed my secret to him. I could always read him like a book, he never could lie to me. I also saw him bleed red more times I can count. Even when you take a human form, your blood is not red. I am glad that no monsters can come here. She can have a peaceful childhood, well as peaceful as a ninja in training can have. I know how to raise her and how to teach her. It's the fact that my husband, though I were the kind of woman he could make a child with and then go looking for the next conquest and forget about us that infuriate me. Another thing that doesn't add up, why would he marry me if he would be leaving? It doesn't add up with the characters of the bachelor playboys gods. Mother told me that if they heard the word marriage, they usually run away as fast as possible. Kushina finished her observations rant and sat down again. She had stood up and started to walk around when she was talking. Poseidon had a frown on his face, thinking. Everything her daughter was telling her was pointing to the sentencing of Apollo 2 decades ago and his return, a few years ago, 3 years ago in fact. But his hands were tied. While some of the ancients' laws could be broken or circumstanced around without too much problem if you were sneaky and careful about it, like the fact that Uzu no Kuni was a haven where mortals and immortals could live side by side in harmony and ruled by a divine binding contract. But telling an unclaimed demigod the name of his divine parent without the permission of said parent was not one you could break with impunity. When a demigod knows what and who she is, their scents become even more potent, risking their lives way quicker than they were ready. It was one of the reasons that the majority of the claiming were done into both camps, borders. Deciding not to break this law, but to put her daughter on the right track, he then said, "This is an ancient law that I'm not going to break. I have my suspicions of which god Minato really was, but nothing concrete. It's not enough to break a law made in place to protect our demigod's children, even if no monsters can come here. Watch your daughter as she grow, she will begin to show abilities akin to her father's domains or traits. With that, you'll be able to deduce who it was and then plan retribution. When it is time for her to come to New York, come with her and I will grant you both an audience in a winter solstice council. Zeus will surely help you by temporary turn your husband into a mortal or tone down his godhood enough for you to manage to express your displeasure. If our king is many things, he can be quite cooperative when there is a show included. I can tell you right now that Naruto is not a forbidden child. Her father is neither me, Zeus nor Hades. For the rest, let's take it 1 year at the time." Kushina really wanted to have all her answers right now, but motherhood taught her patience. Yes, she would be patient and see to her daughter's training. This way she would see what demigod's powers she inherited. She was bound to pick some from her grandfather and her, but it would not be as strong as a child sired by him. The fact that Poseidon circumstanced his oath without breaking it in fathering her was icing on the cake. She was born from mortal parents who had been blessed by him and his wife. It really was like having 2 sets of parents. And when her days on earth would end, she would ascend to immortality at the court of her divine father. But she wasn't in any hurry to go through that yet. She would bow to her father's hard-earned wisdom. After all, vengeance is a dish best served cold. After that night, time did pass again. Yes, it never stopped still. Naruto was now a happy and energetic child of 8 years old. Her pranks had also improved with all her skills. She was fast and agile enough now to outrun civilians and cunning enough to know how to manipulate her target's destination. Jiraiya would come and go, how he managed each time to navigate through the mist and the whirlpools without her aid or one of the soldiers her father positioned to the borders of Uzu no Kuni, she had no firm idea. Probably with the aid of a sea toad, since regular toads couldn't bear too long seawater. Her sweet daughter was becoming something of a sports star and her accuracy was top-notch. It seems that she had taken her lessons in bow staff fighting that Hiruzen gave her when they went to Konoha on visit a few times a year seriously, as she was beginning to be quite adept to it. She was quite good with a bow and a crossbow also. Kushina was a bit sad. At Jiraiya's last visit, he informed her of the Uchiha clan massacre perpetrated by Itachi, with only his little brother Sasuke as a survivor. Said survivor, once back to full health, began walking a dark path. Sasuke has black eyes as well as black hair with a blue tint to it. His hair is spiky in the back, and he has chin-length bangs that parted down to frame both sides of his face. As a young child, his bangs hung above his eyes. Later, they would hang on both sides of his face to roughly frame his cheeks and later again return to their original style. During his early childhood, Sasuke wore a simple long-sleeved black shirt with a raised collar and the Uchiha crest on the back, and black shorts. Kushina almost offered to foster him, but she couldn't foster him in Uzu no Kuni, could she? Well, from what she learned in the last visit from her mother Amphitrite, it seems that she could, as he was a demigod. Sarutobi gave his approval, but Sasuke was to come back with Naruto when she would be 12 for testing to see if they needed a year into the academy or if they could be given the Genin low rookie ninja rank. It seemed that Apollo and Artemis gave the rest of the gods permission to go visit Delos with the proviso decree from Zeus that in exchange for visiting Delos in their time often siring chakra-infused demigods, they were forbidden to have more than 2 children each per century, and only those with a heroic spirit would be permitted into America. That decree applied to all gods class, from minor to primordial. Thus Kushina and Naruto were waiting at the docks of the main island for the boat with supplies from the mainland and Naruto's new foster brother. Sasuke was in a bad way, a loner and not interested in anything that didn't give him a quick path to power to avenge his clan. Of course Kushina and Naruto managed to get through him each of their own ways. Naruto was like a ball of sunshine, she seemingly inherited her father's charisma and could reach everyone. Also her puppy dog eyes were so cute that they could be used as a weapon. Kushina was an adult, thus she tried the gentle approach. When that approach failed, she pushed him to his breaking point, making him attack her. But there was a vast difference of power between the two. Sasuke was a skilled academy-level combatant. Kushina was a Jonin high ninja who lived through a war. That was without the fact of her half-blood nature and without her Jinchūriki powers. It was no contest. Kushina destroyed Sasuke so fast and so hard that he was left as close as a smear on the ground you could become without dying. She did manage to divine who his father was, and it was definitely not Fugaku. He looked too much like his mother, Makoto, physically, and there were no traces of Fugaku in him. With his anger problem and the temporary boost it gave him, she deduced that Sasuke Uchiha was a son of Ares. She first thought he was one of Mars because he wasn't inclined to be a bully and he was oddly polite, but no, his brain was hardwired in ancient Greek. The strangest thing she ever saw though was when Ares himself asked for a meeting on the mainland. When she arrived at the designated meeting place at the set hour, she was face to face with a god who wasn't tied to the oceans for the second time in her life. He was oddly subdued though. Ares typically wears black jeans, combat boots, a leather duster, and muscle shirt with a bulletproof vest, his shield in disguise, and an iron padlock necklace. He wears red-tinted wraparound sunglasses to cover his flame-filled eye sockets. He is described as handsome with scarred cheeks and tall with an oiled crew cut. After a quick inspection to see if somebody was around, she then dropped to one knee, one hand on her raised leg, the other on the ground. It was the stance that shinobis addressed by their Kage Shadow, the leaders of the 5 great villages, took when assembled in platoons. She then took the parole. You asked to see me, Ares-sama. I am Kushina Uzumaki, Jonin of Konohagakure no Sato. For this meeting between a shinobi of Konoha and the god of war, she had dug out her old uniform. She wore a blue forehead protector with her hair tied up in a high ponytail and strands framing the sides of her face. Her attire consisted of a standard Konoha flak jacket over a black short-sleeved shirt and black form-fitting pants that reached her calves. The god seemed a bit put back from the respect given to him, but a warrior respect another. His smile became sincere and with a clear voice he addressed her. Rise, Jonin Uzumaki. It has been a long time since I have been given respect like that. Your people have a saying, look underneath the underneath. I love that phrase. It is so me I would be led to believe that I was the one to invent it, if it was not a mortal invention. I did not call you here for reminiscing though. I wanted to thank you for fostering my son, Sasuke. I openly admit that I am not the father of the year. I am a harsh taskmaster and I am hard to please. I am not good with positive emotions, but to you I say this. Thank you for taking in one of my few children that I feel fatherly love for. As recompense, you can ask of me for one boon and I will do my best to grant it. Kushina did rise when commanded and listened to what he was saying. Well, it was a confirmation more than anything else. Sasuke was still broken, it was time to rebuild him. But she could do that with her daughter's help. What kind of thing would she need a boon for? She obviously couldn't decline, it would not be respectful. Suddenly, an idea formed into her head. Her daughter would need more training in bow techniques than Hiruzen would have time to give her with his Hokage duties. Ares could find a teacher for that. Decision taken, she then said. Ares-sama, my daughter wants to learn how to properly manipulate staff weapons but we lack teachers who have time. Our Hokage is a master at the bow staff, but his leader duties would kept him far too busy to help more than a few lessons here and here. I wish for a good and impartial teacher to teach my daughter how to fight effectively with staff weapons. Ares' only answer was a smile which was kind and feral at the same time before saying. Wish granted. Naruto, from now on, received demigod dreams every other night in which Ares himself instructed her in how to fight properly with all sort of staff weapons, bladed or not. As said when Kushina spoke her boon, Ares was impartial when instructed her. He praised her when she did good and showed her what she did wrong. On Sasuke's front, the boy still desired vengeance but it was tempered by his aunt and cousin presences. One day there would be a reckoning between the Uchiha brothers, but that day would be on Sasuke's terms, not Itachi's. He would not fall into the curse of hatred. Also, he began to learn how to wield a chakudo, a straight, one-edged Japanese sword, but it would take him time to master it, even with his heritage. Naruto and Sasuke, by that point had both unlocked fully their chakra and let me tell you, Naruto's reserves were massive. To help control it, Kushina did teach her the Kage Bunshin shadow clone. She worked out on her own that everything a clone learns, she learns it when it dispels. Sadly for the civilians, that technique became her cornerstone for making even more pranks and to escape before she could get caught. Oh, you have to feel sorry for those poor civilians. The prankster queen from hell became even more dangerous. Naruto also inherited the adamantine sealing chains from Kushina, though they were a pale golden compared to Kushina's silver. Naruto wasn't a genius by any mean. She was fairly intelligent but she was more a kinetic learner than a bookworm. Sasuke wasn't a genius either in the proper sense of the term. Oh, he was really good, borderline prodigious with fire techniques. Well, the few Kushina knew, he did learn them pretty fast. He could also learn pretty easily from a book or a scroll, such as his family techniques. While Naruto was the faster of the two, Sasuke was easily the strongest. It was to be expected, a boy was stronger physically than a girl in upper body strength. They were well on their way to become splendid shinobis. On the front of discovering who was really Minato, with all the clues, she had finally managed to point the finger on Apollo and her theory was that he had pissed of his father one time too many and he was sent on Delos to live as a mortal. That wouldn't save him from his rightful beating though. He could have come back anytime for a conjugal visit at least and to see their daughter if he had any sense of decency. That he did not point to the fact that he had forgotten. That one made her sad. She really loved him. Did she mean so little to him? She shook her head, better not get lost in her thoughts when she was training the kids. Both of them charged her on each side, wanting to trap her into a pincer maneuver. Good move, but too obvious. She dodged Sasuke's chakra-enhanced punch, grabbed his wrist, and then she twirled him into the air to send him into collision with Naruto. The two children let out muffled sounds of pain from the collision but were quick to get back onto their feet. But Kushina had to cut the training short, because she could feel an increase of negative emotions coming from her daughter. She was on her knees, her hands clutching her head and gritting her teeth, while red bubbling chakra was escaping her pores. It was the third incident with young Kurama's chakra in a week. Something was wrong, her daughter shouldn't have access to that chakra yet. Her own relationship with Yin was cordial, having remodeled the mental representation of the seal into a gigantic forest where the Yoko could roam. They were not the best friends of the world, but they could work well together in a pinch. Appearing near her daughter with the signature technique of her husband, Hiraishin no Jutsu, Flying Thunder God technique, she then slammed her hand on Naruto's stomach and with a mental command, she put a restrictive seal to cut her connection with Yang. A few seconds later and the toxic chakra receded back into the seal. The Yang half of Kurama wasn't as cordial and reasonable as his Yin half. Half the time he was trying to tempt Naruto to release him in exchange for a quick death, and the other half, when he was awake, was taking pleasure in screwing his container's training by sending bursts of his chakra through hers to screw her jutsus. They would have to find a way to resolve the problem. Kushina then addressed Sasuke. "It's over for the day, Sasuke. You know when the red chakra comes out that her chakra circulatory system is all screwed up. Go explore the island or something, come back at sunset for supper though. And no leaving the main island alone in your little boat you think I don't know about. I won't let you or Naruto go on expeditions on the other islands before I know for sure you can swim and how to sail a boat." The dark-haired boy bowed his head to that. Damn, he thought he was been sneaky enough. Evidently he still needed to work through it. It was not fair though, Naruto already knew how to sail and how to swim. That girl swam like a mermaid. Sasuke was well aware of the 3 chakra users living on the island being demigods, but for some reason most of the divine tourists tended to avoid him. There was a girl their age with long blue hair that wasn't avoiding them. Aquata was a nereid, a sea nymph. She was immortal, true, but she was really their age. She was the first nereid to be conceived and born in the borders of Uzu no Kuni. As such, she could use sea magic and chakra. Her parents were waiting that she was a bit more mature and able to pass for a human before sending her to a shinobi village to receive training. Kushina was far too busy training Naruto and him and also keeping in shape herself. When the time to go back to Konoha comes, she would be on active duty again, so it figures that she had to be in shape. The Hokage was very generous in giving her a 12 years pregnancy leave. With those thoughts in his head, the dark-haired boy decided to go in town. There was always something interesting to see or do in town. Nothing was as funny as seeing the pervy sage getting chased and beaten to a pulp after getting caught peeping into the women's side of the bathhouses though. Naruto and Kushina were of the same opinion as him. Years passed again and both children had grown. Today was Naruto's 11th birthday, but only her grandmother could come. Amphitrite wasn't the most talkative of what was taking her husband's attention and time, so they just assumed it was one of his kingly duties. Amphitrite is described to be gorgeously beautiful, with black hair pinned back in a net of pearls and silk, eyes as dark as mocha, a kind smile, and a beautiful laugh. She usually dressed in a simple white gown, and her only piece of jewelry was a circlet of polished red crab claws across her brow. She always has a kind smile and kind words for Sasuke, even if he wasn't part of the family. The birthday party was fun, with cake and fizzy drinks. There was music, songs and games. There were also gifts, but Naruto was not a materialistic person. After every other child left, Amphitrite did declare that she had a gift for Naruto from her and Poseidon. It was a fabulous weapon. It was somehow a cross between a trident, a bishaman yari, a Japanese spear, and a ji, a Chinese halberd with a crystalline appearance. Like the ji, it bears a horsehair tassel, although it is blue instead of the traditional red. Similarly, the 2 side blades are straight with concave edges as opposed to the usual crescent blades of the bishaman yari. The end of the weapon turns into a corkscrew drill shape. Yes, Sasuke knew his weapons. He was a son of Ares after all. Naruto was speechless. The hybrid weapon was fantastic and magnificent. She never saw something like that before. Her grandmother wasn't done though. The Cyclops blacksmiths who made it used an interesting alloy of celestial bronze and chakra-conducting metal. It means that your new weapon can be used against supernatural creatures and mortals. You have to be careful with it, it has never been done before, and so we don't know how the mist will present it to mortals outside of Delos. If you twist it just under the tassel, it will shrink back and turn into a necklace. Also, when you are ready to start your elemental training, you will be able to channel your elemental chakra into your weapon to make even more deadly move. Amphitrite did join word by action in showing her granddaughter how to do it. In a blue-green bubble-like light, the hybrid weapon shrinks down to the size of a charm necklace. Now with her last gift around her neck, she looked a bit more feminine. Not that Naruto cared about that, she was a tomboy through and through. She was going to be a kunoichi like her mother, and Sasuke was going to be an awesome shinobi, and together they would track down Itachi and kick his all around the field and make him cry, "Uncle," before bringing him to justice. She was brought back from her daydreams by her mother's voice. "Honey, how about you go giving your weapon a name in place of daydreaming about some future adventure? A hero's weapon needs a good name, you know." Embarrassed to have been caught daydreaming, Naruto made a big cheesy-like smile, so wide that her whiskers' birthmarks made her look like a fox. So wide that it forced her to close her eyes, then she put a hand behind her head to rub it in her hair. That was a very Minato-like gesture. Kushina and Amphitrite both giggled at the cute gesture, and Sasuke let out a mocking snort, making him receive a glare that promised retribution. At least his stuff was safe. There was a ban of pranks in the house after a paint bomb gone wrong gave the kitchen a new paint job. Lucky for Naruto and Sasuke, Triton was there to deliver news from Atlantis and to partake in the holy food that was ramen, so for a bonus bowl he was willing to use his power to clean the mess, but not before they were caught and grounded for it. When Kushina's hair was taking the form of 9 tails and waving around, you knew she was mad. After thinking a long while, Naruto settled on a name. Taking out the necklace, she then twisted it under the tassel, and in a flash, the trident look-alike was in weapon form. Naruto then said out loud, "I name thee Nejibana, the twisted flower." The newly named Nejibana then flashed in an inner light, and once you could see again, the name was engraved in hiragana on one side and in katakana on the other side. After her 11th birthday, Naruto redoubled her training with Nejibana. Ares was still appearing into her demigod dreams at least 3 nights a week to instruct her to a level he would feel adequate. Those lessons soon grew to encompass Sasuke, whose prowess with the Chikudo was now growing by leaps and bounds, after a prayer and a sacrifice to his divine father. Sasuke could now swim like a professional and navigate his skiff with dexterity. To gain brownies points with his divine sire, he went fishing for sharks. How an 11-year-old shinobi in training managed to do in a great white shark and sacrificed it to his father's name, he wouldn't tell, no matter how nagging Naruto could become. Back on the training, of course, Sasuke couldn't use the Kage Bunshin training method as Naruto could do. He didn't have enough chakra capacity for that, but his reserves were more than average on regular standards, and his chakra control was more refined than her. Something he was pleased to put it under her nose when her head would become too big. Loving the islander life, both children would go sail in the archipelago on their time off to explore the others' islands by themselves, sating their thirst for adventure. Of course they couldn't leave the archipelago and go in the open sea. First of all, their skiffs were not big enough and well equipped enough to last days at sea, and nobody could enter or leave without permission from Poseidon, Amphitrite or Triton. The gods had erected a natural coral barrier all around the archipelago, and the only way to pass through was at high tide when the whirlpools weren't active or through divine help. Not even the more hardcore shinobis of Kurigakure no Sato, well used to the dangers of the ocean, could bypass the new measures of defense of Uzu no Kuni. For the big boats transporting people and or merchandise approved and sworn to silence by the gods from into the mainland, they were escorted at high tide through the doors by soldiers of Poseidon specially trained to handle the mist. After the stunt of having a Roman demigod and a Roman goddess appear into this sanctuary, Poseidon had left no stones unturned to find how it could have happened. He first thought that it was a joke from Neptune, but the Roman sea god was not the kind to play games like that. Something had broken through the mist hiding Delos from the rest of the world and created a portal to send a son of Vulcan through, and let also through a Roman deity. Poseidon was happy to allow his Roman self's court to enjoy Uzu no Kuni, but this interloper had not went through the proper channels to secure a vacation there. After a thorough investigation, Triton came forward and confessed that he had opened a portal to go see a flame of his in New Rome. In hurry to get to his booty call, he had not closed properly the portal. It explained thus why the son of Vulcan stumbled through it and why Lupa had enough power to restore it when he was almost sealed shut when she tracked down the missing legionnaire. Poseidon could not really fault his son to be in hurry to go meet his paramour. He was not always the most cautious either when creating a shortcut when Amphitrite was in the mood for some bedroom fun. Said Queen of the Sea though, was not so forgiving. Triton was forced into human form, and humiliated in front of his chibi squad. The kids loved Triton. He was like a cool older cousin who had showed them how to build their own skiffs and how to sail them. He was then shoved on his mother's knees, his pants down to the knees and spanked hard with a celestial bronze paddle. On the beach, the kids were roped into counting the numbers of swats he was to receive. Poseidon tried to intervene in his oldest son's favor, but the look he received from his wife told him he would sleep on the couch for quite a while if he tried it. Hating the couch like any husbands and clearly henpecked, he kept his mouth shut and went to the local pub in the village for a pint. He would help his eldest forget the punishment by buying him a round or two. He was not in the mood to be cut off. No way, no sir. Heck, Amphitrite even told him she was in the mood for another baby. He had to agree with her. Seeing his granddaughter grow up did rekindle the feelings he had when he was helping his wife in taking care of the children when they were little. Soon, the kid's 12th birthday came and went. It was time to go back to Konoha as promised. They were ready to be shinobis. Once they had all their belongings they were taking with them and put in storage what they couldn't take with them. Like Sasuke and Naruto's skiffs, they went to the port, ready to embark on a vessel bound for the mainland. The trio were going to really miss living in Uzu no Kuni, but it's not like they would never come back. They just couldn't choose another profession. Kushina and Naruto were Jinchūriki, thus military assets. They only managed to have such a life because of Hiruzen Sarutobi's grace. Sasuke was the last loyal Uchiha and now heir apparent since Itachi was now a Nukenin rogue or deserter ninja. Even if the Hokage wanted to let them have a life as civilians, it wouldn't be possible. Too many people knew that Naruto contained the Kyuubi and if she's not under Konoha's banner, other villages would be free to acquire her. You don't want to know what war hawks would be ready to do to a little girl with such promise as Naruto. Trust me on that, you don't want to know what the villages not as ethical as Konoha could do with a little girl. Once aboard the ship, they were escorted out of the country at high tide by a contingent of merman soldiers. Once they were cleared the corral barrier, they could hear Triton blowing in his conch. It was a simple goodbye, see you soon, not a farewell. Once they were firmly into the open sea, the mist, both the regular and magical, rose to cover one of the few entrances of Uzu no Kuni. It would take the ship 4 days of sailing in open sea waters before docking into Nami no Kuni, land of waves. Nami was a little island, about half the size of Uzu's main island, who still housed the ruins of Uzushiogakure no Sato. The land of waves has many rivers running through it and is famous for its mangroves, which are filled with all kinds of life forms. Though an isolated island, relying on shipping for commerce and trade, it was prosperous. The trio would spend the night there at one of the inns and would set out for Konoha tomorrow morning. They could have taken the ninja road, aka tree hopping, but after 4 days at large, the girls needed a good bath. Of course, Sasuke knew better than saying anything about that. The one and only time he followed Triton's advice on what to say to women, he almost got the Jiraiya treatment. A hormonal and pissed Kushina was really terrifying, like Run for the Hills terrifying. A hormonal and pissed Amphitrite was making you wish to be Ares' new punching bag to escape her wrath. Hell has no fury like a woman scorned indeed. It was that day that Sasuke learned that Triton's advices on women were to never be followed. How that guy managed to score in having demigod children, even Jiraiya has no idea. After a good night of sleep and a filling breakfast, Kushina decided against chartering a fisherman to make them cross the inlet separating Nami no Kuni to Hai no Kuni. She decided it was time for her to use her innate gifts as a daughter of Poseidon and Amphitrite by diving under the sea with the children. Naruto was a legacy 2 generations away, a granddaughter. It translated to a very powerful water chakra affinity, innate ability to swim and propels herself into the water. She could also breathe underwater for a few hours, and she had an easy time to learn how to sail. She couldn't command the water like the sea gods or her mother, and sea animals were not bound to obey her, but were very friendly and tended to help her when she asked. She was also immune to sharks' attacks. Contrary to Kushina, she could not extend her gifts to those close to her. Thus Kushina created a bubble of air around Sasuke's head to let him breathe. She was holding his hand to not let him swim by his own means. Don't get him wrong. Having lived a few years the life of an islander, he could swim pretty well, but a swimmer couldn't beat a fish in a swimming competition. That was the difference between Kushina and Naruto's abilities and his own. He wasn't vexed or anything. Heck, he was better at fighting with weapons than both of them combined. Perks of being a son of war. After a good hour, they finally put foot on High no Kuni's soil. Kushina did will them all dry, and after 10 minutes of rest, they charged their bodies with chakra, and then jumped to the gigantic trees that mark the forests of this land. If they maintained a good pace, they would arrive at the village at sunset, bathroom and lunch breaks included. Naruto was watching everything, from the evergreen to the birds. She did come every year to Konoha in summer for a visit with her mother for about a week, but they had never taken the ninja road before. While Kushina wasn't skilled with the Hiraishin as much as her defunct husband, she could teleport just fine from one location to another. Naruto did try to have her mother teach her the trick. Teleportation, the ultimate prank tool. But the answer was no. Not before she managed to be promoted to Chunin, or when she would be deemed mature enough. That one did make her pout. Eventually they did arrive to destination. Konoha resides deep within a forest at the base of a mountain known as the Hokage Monument, which has the faces of all those who have taken the office of Hokage engraved on it. While generally seen as the most powerful of the ninja villages, Konoha has enjoyed many years of relative peace and stability. From there, many things happened. The trio move into a modest house with 3 bedrooms near the Hyuga district. Naruto and Sasuke and a pink-haired girl named Sakura Haruno were assigned as Team 7 to Kakashi Hatake, Jonin, the last remaining student of Minato once they passed the graduation exam in the Ninja Academy. Naruto and Sasuke were already a good team, able to backing the other and compensate for each other's weaknesses. They were already adept in weapons training, with Sasuke's 12th birthday gift from his father being a Chikudo forged with the same alloy as Nejibana, a savon mix of celestial bronze and chakra-conductive metal, able to slay mortals and monsters alike. His lethal swordsmanship is very versatile, using impressive speed and precision behind his attacks to leave little time for enemies to react. He can effectively wield it in either hand using a normal or reverse grip, giving him various attack and defense styles to use. He can use his blade as a mid-range projectile with great precision. But the weak link was Sakura. The girl had delusions of being a damsel in distress and be saved by her Prince Charming. Sasuke. Sakura has bright pink hair, large green eyes, and fair skin. Sakura was often bullied due to her rather large forehead, hence her nickname of billboard brow. Due to this she wore her bangs over her forehead in an attempt to cover it, though Ino encouraged her to wear her hair back. Sakura wore a red kippou dress with white circular designs, with or without short sleeves, with a zipper, tight dark green shorts, standard ninja sandals, and a forehead protector which she used to accentuate her face. While Naruto's outfit consisted of an orange tracksuit with blue on the upper shoulders area as well as around the waist, a white swirl with a tassel on the left side, a red Uzumaki swirl crest on the back, a large white collar, orange pants with a shuriken holster attached to her right knee due to being right-handed, blue sandals, and a blue forehead protector that was given to her after graduating with ease. Naruto would usually wear a black t-shirt inside her tracksuit, but sometimes wore armor underneath her clothing. She also had bandages to bind her budding under her mesh shirt. Yes, it was gaudy, but she was the prankster queen from hell and dressed like that. The week before graduation, she had managed to paint the entire Hokage monument in broad daylight and was only caught doing it after she was done. She also managed to outrun and outwit several Jonins and Chunins sent to her pursuit, only to be eventually caught by her mother and made to clean her mess. Yeah, pranks are great, but not when mom ruined her fun. Back to the subject at hand, Sakura didn't take her training seriously and never went further than the basics that were taught at the academy. They did manage to pass the real test, but Kakashi-sensei flat out told them that they were going to make Sakura a real shinobi out of her or make her resign from the corps and them a real unit able of teamwork before going anywhere outside the village. Thus it was a long 3 months to first break Sakura out of her little girl mindset, then put her on a specialized diet for gaining muscle mass, because frankly, she was a twig. After that they had to build her up from the ground. It was a long process, but results were showing. You got to give the devil his due, the Haruno wasn't giving up. Something good did came out of that, an inspection in detail by the Hokage and Ibiki Morino of the academy curriculum showed that it had been illegally tempered with to let more civilian-born children pass more easily, and if more clan children got killed in the process, well, for the culpable, it wasn't a big loss in their opinion. It had been a very gradual process, slow to move, one careful step at the time. One false move would have them found out before their plan could have been enacted. Who is there? Well, a sort of syndicate of rich merchants and businessmen of all sorts mixed in with some retired shinobis who had some grudges against the ninja clans. Needless to say, the academy curriculum was in for some massive reforms. Seriously, it's almost a miracle that no big tragedies occurred with the cold peace going on. The headmaster of the academy was fired and all the teachers were to be interviewed heavily to determine how much they were involved in this. Needless to say that those who were saying that Sarutobi was too old and too soft to still be the Hokage saw that behind the grandfatherly facade, he was still the fierce shinobi who fought and survived 2 of the 3 shinobi world wars. The guilty were quickly and quietly disposed of. Anybody who messes with the future generations of the village would earn themselves a swift one-way trip, all expenses paid, to the underworld. The message was loud and clear. Hiruzen Sarutobi, the professor, the 3rd Hokage, was still very much dangerous and very much deadly. On Kushina's side, her return into the forces was very smooth, it felt like she never took a maternity leave at all. She didn't lose any of her skills or her sharpness. She took missions after missions, eager to refill her dwindling bank account. Raising 2 children after rebuilding a country would do that. She had been offered a chance to take a genin team, but she had already built from the ground her daughter and rebuilt her friend's son after beating the emo out of him. Maybe in a few years she would take a chibi squad, but for now she preferred working with her fellow adults again. On Training Ground 7, waiting for their ever-tardy sensei teacher, Master Naruto and Sasuke had decided to spar using their weapons. With a twist under the tassel, Nejibana was now in weapon form. Naruto took the staff part in hand, made it twirl in different directions and different speeds to warm up. It wouldn't do to hurt herself for nothing. Sasuke did take his Chikudo out too and started his warm-ups exercises. He had named his sword in honor of his mother, Makoto. As the 2 friends, rivals, were doing their warm-ups exercises, Sakura dragged her aching and protesting body to the training grounds. She sat under the shade of a nearby tree, watching her teammates spar with their respective weapons with attention. It was like a dance. Naruto's strikes were powerful because she was building them with the G-force, but she was naturally fast. Sasuke seemed to be stronger, which makes sense because he's a boy and seemed more competent was the word, with his Chikudo. His strikes were just strong enough to deviate the trident. It get tiring to always say hybrid weapon, so let's go for trident. But when Naruto would accumulate enough force to make a harder strike, he would dodge. Naruto wasn't motionless either, she was moving all her upper body, recalling the dream lessons Ares sensei gave her on staff weapons. Sometimes she went for simple stabs or simple side hits. She almost couldn't wait to start her elemental affinity training. Using the winds created by the movements of Nejibana would go a long way to make her deadlier. Or with water, the full force of the agitated waves would crash on her foes. It was after one more deadlock that their sensei appeared. Kakashi is a fit and relatively tall shinobi, with spiky silver hair and dark gray eyes. Since his first Jonin mission, he obtained a small vertical scar running over his left eye, which was soon replaced by a Sharingan. While unknown why, since early childhood, Kakashi has worn a mask over the nose and lower half of his face. Kakashi's personality is further emphasized by his generally lazy expression, aloof mannerisms, relaxed voice, and minimalist attitude. In serious situations, however, he is shown to have a very stern and intense look. He would also come out with the most stupid reasons for being late. Seriously, after hearing it for 2 weeks straight, Naruto stopped listening altogether. Sasuke, after being annoyed, did the same. But it's not like they could do anything about that, so they would occupy themselves. Sorry I'm late. I got lost on the road of life. Naruto would just lift a golden eyebrow, but said nothing. Sasuke would answer with his now common, HNN, and Sakura, well after a painful lesson, she took it to heart to not yell like a banshee anymore. She would still scolded him in saying in a normal tone, "You're late." Then after hearing the program for the day, they would go to the mission assignment office to get a D-rank mission. It was chores but it was easy money. Hey, they had to start somewhere. And usually we start at the bottom before climbing our way to the top. Naruto and Sasuke were clearly high genin level, but they still had much to learn. And Jonin Kakashi Hatake would be the one to teach them. After a good 3 months of nothing but training and D-ranks missions, Team 7 was growing very restless. Even Sasuke, the most patient of the three, was swearing in private that the next time he had to chase Tora, the cat of the daimyo's wife. A daimyo is a feudal lord, sort like a prince or a governor. He will more likely fry the annoying beast than bring it back to the mission office alive. Patience had never been Naruto's forte, so to be able to deal with the demeaning chores for so long without complaining was a miracle, or her mother was bribing her with ramen every week. Even the even-tempered girl Sakura became after having the fangirl trained out of her was fed up. Now to pass that message to the Hokage without looking like a brat was their common goal. By the twinkling into the old man's eyes, he was well aware of how fed up they were and it was amusing him greatly. Though something was missing, more likely someone, due to the blatant absence of the Jonin sensei. Hiruzen then asked, "Have any of you seen Kakashi? Usually he's here with you for the mission taking." He scrutinized the children with his experienced eyes and saw that Naruto wasn't even trying to look innocent. With a great sigh he then said, "Okay, I'll bite. What did you do to him?" Naruto grinned like a fox and answered her leader. "Well, first of all, I switched all his porn collection with yaoi." His cry of anguish and indignation was hilarious. "Then I hid all his originals eki ones all around the village. Of course, I didn't make it easy for him. It's like a treasure hunt, but for his books, without a map. Oh, and also I told Guy Sensei that it would be most youthful of him to help his eternal rival find them. So Kakashi Sensei is now trying to recover his books with bushier brows Sensei challenging him to odd competitions all around the clock. So, he won't be here anytime soon I would hazard to guess. I also considered for a while stealing all of Kurenai Sensei's underwear and hang them around his house then wait for the sure to be explosives results, but I thought it would be funnier switching and hiding his porn." She finished with glee and another large fox-like grin that showed the fangs she inherited from Yonkurama inside of her. Hiruzen shook his head with an amused smile, while reminiscing about younger days. Sasuke was trying his best to not laugh out loud. It was a straining battle, as seeing the corners of his mouth twitching. He loved to see the results of the pranks of his foster sister. Sakura, in her case, didn't know what to feel. It was shameful in her eyes for an adult to read porn in front of children, but to prank Sensei was an opening from him to retaliate in kind. And it was disrespectful to their superior officer. The joke was funny though. Uruka Yumino, one of the Chunins who often teaches at the academy, who was on mission desk duty today, was a bit outraged and awed of this slip of a girl's prank. He was a prankster too in his academy days, but to do that to a Jonin and not getting caught in the act. Either she was really good or Kakashi let himself go, or maybe it was a combination of the two. Just to make it sink even more, outside of the door they could hear Guy's overbearing loud voice encouraging his team. So Kakashi had ditched him, or maybe his team came to remember their schedule. Well, no matter. Without a supervisor, they couldn't have a mission, thus a day off. Sarutobi shooed them out of the room, and once outside, they all decided to do something different. Sakura was going to the hot baths to relax. Naruto told her to watch out for peeping toms. The other kunoichi nodded at that before leaving with a brisk pace. Sasuke was going to take care of his Chikudo and maybe meditate a bit to try and master his war boost, and Naruto decided to go for ramen. You could never be wrong with the food of the gods. Even her grandparents liked it. If that wasn't an endorsement, she wasn't the prankster queen from hell. With Yondaime Hokage-like speed, she became a blonde blur of light that was jumping across the rooftops at top speed, passing by a completely flabbergasted ANBU patrol that stopped to look her go. Yep, she was her father's daughter for sure. Even without his space-time techniques, Minato Namikaze was a literal speed demon when he was alive. The blur of light became a young kunoichi on the cusp of teenagerhood again, a few rooftops before her haven and destination, the Ichiraku ramen stand. She did a few acrobatic cartwheels finished by an impressive somersault to the ground. Seeing her natural agility, speed and flexibility during team training, Kakashi-sensei had focused her training mostly in evasion tactics and hit-and-run techniques. She had a more slender build than Sakura, who had another body type. She didn't know which, since she stopped listening after that. Kakashi-sensei had said something about geishas and brothel girls and then giggled about it for the rest of the training session, weirding everybody. When she repeated it to her mother that evening, she had grabbed her trusty saucepan and went out, just saying that she would be back soon. She had to be mad, her hair was waving into 9 tails when she went out. She came back an hour and a half later. The saucepan had a few new bumps on it and her sensei was full of hematomas the next day and his porn book nowhere in sight. Adults were weird. After another cartwheel, Naruto jumped onto the middle bench of the stand and said out loud, "Oi, Tyuki Gigi. 3 bowls of miso ramen please." The cook and owner of the stand let out a hearty laugh. "Like mother, like daughter." He then answered, "Incoming then. I do hope you haven't forgotten your money home like the other day." He finished with a teasing tone. Naruto, in her case, put a pout in her face and ballooned her cheeks before answering, offended. "Ah, give it a rest Gigi. It only happened one time. I ran back home in a flash and I was back 5 minutes later. I even gave you a tip to say I was sorry. Geez." Quote. She finished with her arms crossed. Ayame, the daughter of Tyuki who was working in the family business as a waitress, had to hide her mouth as she giggled. The little ball of sunshine was just too cute. She got worked for about anything, or she was just the kind of people who wear her emotions on her sleeve. Then something even weirder than the regular weird of Konoha did passes near the stand. It was a quite ruffled Kakashi. His clothes were torn into some places, his face mask was so damaged you could see the left side of his jaw and he was missing a sandal. He hobbled towards the stand and when in front of Naruto, he stopped, then fell to his knees. He took a begging position and then pleaded with a sobbing voice. "Please, please Naruto. Give me back my Ika books. It's been 12 hours and I can't find them anywhere. I have to read one of them. I can't live without my porn. I beg of you. You are not cruel by nature, you can't keep my precious from me much longer, please." What Naruto hadn't told anybody else, it was the fact that she hadn't hidden the books at different places in the village. While she still couldn't use the Hiraishin with the tri-pronged kunai formula, she had gained enough Fuinjutsu sealing techniques knowledge to use the permanent seals markers. She had stolen the books, replaced them with yaoi-filled ones and then used the Hiraishin to go back to Uzu no Kuni to hide them in her room, in her family home there, then come back to Konoha quickly. As an accredited shinobi, She couldn't leave the village without approval from her superiors lest she be marked a nukenin if she was gone more than a week and severely punished if she was gone without a good reason for a lesser time. She had skirted the rules for that prank by getting permission from her mother to go back to leave a sacrifice for her grandparents, just to tell them that she was thinking about them and missing them. She had made her food sacrifices into the Greek fire once in Uzu, but she had also dropped the books on her bed. Getting them back would be a bit tricky though. Her mother would not give her permission to leave the village again for that reason. She hated Jiraiya's porn books with a passion and didn't care if Kakashi had his literature or not. If he wasn't an adult, she would have seized them and burned them in front of him as a lesson. As it is, those books weren't welcome in her house. But, if her sensei gave her permission, she could go retrieve them. But what seal she could use? Her mom would know if she used the one in the house and it would lead to awkward questions. The only other permanent Hiraishin seal she knew of on this side of Delos was in the Hokage Tower. Normally the seal would be in a restricted section, but as only the elite guards of her late father or those of his blood or those he keyed into the seal formula could use them, it was left in a public place. Nobody but Kushina had the seal expertise necessary to decipher them, not even Jiraiya could make head or tails of the Hiraishin. It was set in a room adjacent of the mission desk on the ground floor. The room had an almost museum aspect, like look at the seal, put there by the late Yondaime Hokage, stuff. Gaining her scheming look, she then said to her sensei in a sweet voice and with twinkling eyes. Kakashi-sensei, I hid the books elsewhere, the treasure hunt in the village was only a wild goose chase I mounted just for you. But if you really want them, I will need your express permission as my superior officer for a little sanctioned trip outside the village. It's literally a few seconds away if I use the permanent Hiraishin seal back and forth. Boot, without that permission, you won't have your books back. And without official permission, I can't leave the village without serious consequences. I really don't want to be labeled a nukenin for being AWOL. Mom would track me down and beat me like a pervert who tried to grope her if I tried. I am not into self-inflicted pain. That's pervy Sage's shtick. She finished with a knowing foxy smirk. She had him. He wants his books back. He must take responsibility and permit a genin under his tutelage that doesn't have AC rank under her belt yet out of the village, however long it took. It was against the village regulations and he could catch a lot of flack for that from the Hokage. But what was worse, a black mark in his record and a scolding by Sarutobi are not been able to read his oh-so-precious porn. He couldn't just buy a new collection, his books were all limited special editions. A few of them even autographed by Jiraiya-sama. While Kakashi was debating internally, Naruto decided to inhale at great speed her ramen that was being made during the discussion once the bowls were on the counter of the stand. Her sensei would have to deal with his dilemma by himself. Once done and her delicious meal paid for, she didn't give Kakashi another look and became a blur of light again with how fast she was running. The oddest thing though was she could only access that kind of speed when it was daylight, it was like she was absorbing sunlight to power up her running. Kakashi snapped back to reality and cursed under his breath when he saw the blur of golden light bounce between buildings. When she was like that, nobody could catch her. If she had the lightning affinity chakra nature, that ability of her would have made her an ideal candidate to learn the Chidori, literally 1000 birds, because in that state, she was hyper-aware of her surroundings. All her senses stretched to compensate the speed at which she was moving. But, young Naruto was like her parents, wind and water natured. She could still learn techniques of other elements, but it would be very difficult. He got up and let out a big sigh. It looks like he would have to do without his porn for at least a few more hours. Sobs. Naruto really was a devious little vixen. Kakashi would not underestimate her ever again though. Days later, and with his beloved porn books back, Hiruzen got fed up to see him moping all over the place and bursting into tears at random intervals, so he gave official permission to Naruto to go retrieve the books and congratulate her into using the rules masterfully within her pranks. Team 7 were on their first C-rank mission. They were to escort the bridge builder Tazuna back to Nami no Kuni and protect him from roving bandits. Sasuke, trained into reading the body language to be able to use better his Sharingan. Kushina beat him senseless in a brutal training session to the point it had come out straight at 2 tomos, was able to see the signs of lying, and he made it known to Kakashi and his teammates with discreet hand sings. They were ready for anything, but were acting casual to fool whoever came after the bridge builder. It was Naruto who remarked that whoever was after Tazuna were either rookies or rejects. Seriously. A genjutsu with a puddle of water wasn't very believable when it hadn't rained in a few weeks in this region. She discreetly hand-signed that she was acting, before she took a more childish action. She broke formation and ran towards the puddle, in which she proceeded to jump in it repeatedly while laughing. The illusion now broken, she was doing her jumping jacks upon the heads of 2 Kiri Nukenin by seeing the scratch across their headbands. Seeing they were quite disoriented from the hits, it was child play to apprehend them. Naruto went even a step further and put their chakra circulatory system out of whack by channeling some of her massive reserves through their coils, which weren't used to the strain of so much of the stuff. Chakra overload was as serious as chakra depletion and literally a bitch to recover from. Anyway, those 2 were lucky enough that she didn't channel Yonkurama's chakra trough them. Without a safe way to filter it, Biju chakra was extremely toxic and mortal if not treated very quickly. How does she know that? Well, she had always bits and bobs of medicine stuff passing through her head. She wasn't a qualified medic nin, but she learned the basics and how to do first aid from her lessons. Kakashi-sensei was all business. With an ominous air upon what could be seen of his face, he ordered his team to stand guard and to not come into the woods under any pretexts and to wait for his return. The genin obeyed and put themselves into a triangular formation all around the client. Sakura was on the right with a kunai in hand, Sasuke was on the left with a hand on his Chikudo's guard, and Naruto was on front with Nejibana in weapon form. All of them were on guard. Kakashi's warning was made clear when they heard really loud pain screams coming from the woods. Evidently, the Jonin was torturing the enemy for information. Information was the lifeblood of a shinobi. Good intelligence could save a lot of lives as bad intel could cost many. But the torture bit, all 4 of them were not prepared for it. It was not something that their teachers prepared them for. Sasuke was the less disturbed because of the fact that he saw what his elder brother did to their clan. It wasn't pretty one way or another, and even if the years with Kushina and Naruto had somewhat healed him, the scars would always be there. Naruto was a little disturbed, but she was made of stern stuff. She wasn't some weak and pampered noble's daughter. Kushina loved her daughter more than anything in the world, she even loved her enough to teach her how real life was. Nothing is more eyes-opening than seeing a real shinobi take down a bandit camp that ran a kidnapping ring of young girls. She may not have received the talk yet, but her mother did told her what could happen to a girl if she was taken prisoner by the enemy. Rape was a way to break even the most hardened kunoichi. Well, war is more eyes-opening, but Delos was in a status of cold peace, so no war zones ready for a field trip. Sakura was the one who was the most affected. While she had made great progress, it was the first time she was confronted to this side of the ninja world. Curiously, it was Tazuna who was able to reassure her. He was a civilian, true, but he was old enough to have seen what war could do. The Third War wasn't that far into the past. After a long while, the forest was finally silent. Kakashi walked out of the forest and you could tell that his aloof persona was long gone. Now was the shinobi who made his name in the Third Ninja World War and beyond. Needless to say, it didn't take long for Tazuna to spill the beans about the truth of Wave's situation. Kakashi wanted to face Palm badly. Now he was stuck between a rock and a hard place. Go back to Konoha because of a breach of agreement from the contractor's side was the possible, responsible, easy thing to do. Going forward with the mission would be the right thing to do. But his team, while skilled, was not even remotely ready for that. It was the devious vixen mind of Naruto who found the solution. Gato is bad news, I get that. Nami is short on money and you only had enough for AC rank, I understand completely. We aren't enough trained to fight a rank Nukenins like Zabuza Momochi or have clearance to do diplomatic work. Well, Sensei can fight the Nukenin and do diplomatic stuff in a pinch, but he's a Jonin. But hasn't Gato been overreaching? The guy is actually trying to get most of the seaports on Hai no Kuni's side of the inlet, separating this country and Nami under his thumb. From what Mom's report said, he's even working on a few of them beyond that, near the border with Cha no Kuni. Land of Teat, we could do what we are paid to do. Boot, we could confirm to the Hokage that the guy is playing in our sandbox first without following our rules. The daimyo may look like a sissy at first glance, but he can't stand drugs dealers, so we could cover our asses on this side too. I was in the mission room, tied up after getting caught trying to steal Sarutobi Gigi's porn when Mom came back from her mission of reconnaissance and information gathering about those ports, and since it wasn't classified, I was authorized to stay for the debriefing. With confirmation that it is Gato's mode of operations, Konoha can act without a mission request and get paid by the daimyo for doing our jobs and get rid of the drugs and the thugs who broke our laws. A special assassination team will be sent after the guy, and with Tezuna's intel, we can tell them which way to go to get rid of Gato and his enterprise, then we, the village, can clean house. And when the bridge is completed, we will have succeeded our first C rank. She finished with a smile. Kakashi was surprised, he didn't know that Naruto could reason like that. She never showed the type of critical thinking before. Well, in her defense, it was probably never needed. Well, if indeed Gato was playing in their sandbox and wasn't respecting the rules, they could act. Summoning one of his ninja dogs and sent him with a message to the Hokage, the Jonin then ordered them to continue for a while. When at halfway point, they decided to stop for the night. The Jonin gave his instructions. Naruto, your senses are sharper than even mine, go find something for a meal. Something big like a deer or a couple of rabbits will do. Sasuke, you are on wood gathering duty. Sakura, dig a fire pit, then mount the tents. I will be right back, I just need to do some recon around this clearing. With that, everybody went to his appointed task after a, yes, sensei. Naruto, who was coming to terms with her half of Kurama, shape-shifted into a blue-eyed lion-sized golden three-tailed vixen with white tips upon her tails and dove into the woods with an excited bark. She was long gone a few seconds later. Sasuke withdrew his Chikudo from its sheath and went towards the same side of the woods that Naruto dove into, cutting branches quickly and making small piles to take back to camp when he was done. Sakura then started to hum a little song and went to work while Kakashi took to the trees. Tezuna was dumbfounded. He had seen shinobis before, but a girl transforming into a giant fox. That was a new one. Naruto was the last one to come back to camp. What announced her was the crashing of the underbrush when the three-tailed fox got out of the woods with a big buck with about 12 points on his panache that she was trailing in her jaws by the neck. With a movement of the head, she let down her prey at the feet of her sensei, the alpha of the pack, who praised her by scratching her behind the ears. Good girl. Now, change back before you get lost into the instincts. You did well, now it's my turn to prepare the meat. Quote. Naruto whined a bit. She was having so much fun in this form, but the alpha of the pack gave an order and she had to obey. With a flash of golden fox fire, the beast became a girl once more. She had to be careful with that type of transformation or she could lose her humanity and not being able to change back. She went to sit with her teammates and let her sensei do the rest. The thrill of the hunt had been great and she could feel Kurama inside his seal was satisfied. That type of transformation allowed him to see what she sees and access to her other senses. But it also put the animal instincts in conflict with her human mind. That's why she had to be careful with that power. Once the deer was prepared and the meat was cooked, everyone started to eat in comfortable silence, lost into the twilight of the setting sun. Naruto perked when she heard the Ninken messenger approaching. He must have run all the way back for he was panting. While Sensei recovered the scroll containing their new orders, she took her water canteen and one of the bowls she had in her pack, and then put water in it to offer it to the messenger. The Ninken did show his appreciation by licking her hand and letting her pet him. Once the Ninken was finished and returned to the summons realm, Kakashi brought their attention by clearing his throat. We have our orders. We are to wait for the assassination squad to rendezvous with us tomorrow. They will go ahead and take out the trash, so to speak. One will go to Nami with us and will take care of Gato, while the others will head towards the other ports on our side. We head on with Tazuna and help him finish his bridge as specified in the request. If we encounter any others Nukennons, well, that part will be my business. Let's start with guard shifts. Naruto, you take first watch, you have too much energy to sleep right now. Sasuke will take second, his Sharingan can help him see in the darkness. I will take the third watch and Sakura will be on the breakfast chore. Tazuna, you can sleep in the middle tent. Well, let's get to it. The night passed without problems, nobody saw anything problematic on their guard shifts. After breakfast, Kakashi had his subtens spar lightly against each others to stay in shape, then he proved his mettle by meeting Nejibana in combat with a kunai of all things. What he didn't tell the girl was that he had to subtly reinforce his kunai by channeling earth nature chakra into the ninja tool, or the trident would have chopped it off. Though he had to put a stop to the spar, he could see that Naruto was about to use her solar speed by the bright golden light that was rapidly coming out from all over her body, and as good as he was, he couldn't react that fast without resorting to his implanted Sharingan, and he couldn't let his cute little students think they could kick his no. They were soon met by a squad of 10 ANBU operatives. The leader was a woman with long purple hair and with a cat mask. They discussed a bit away from the genin and the civilian. After a while, the squad dispersed, leaving only the cat-masked operative to follow them. From there, the mission to Wave was on the road. After getting to the other side of the inlet by an unusual way, Naruto had sensed a pack of killer whales nearby and asked if they would be willing to give them a lift. So with 2 by whale, they were soon on Nami no Kuni. Once near the bridge, Kakashi took Tazuna with him via the tree walking exercise up the pillar of the bridge, and operative cat took Sakura with her the same way. Naruto and Sasuke, having learnt the exercise in the beginning of their training with Kushina, were able to scale the pillars by themselves. Everybody but Sasuke was questioning how Naruto was able to detect the pack of orcas and how she managed to convince them to ferry the humans, but her lips were sealed. As it was nothing that could be a danger to the mission, Kat and Kakashi let it go. They would touche a word to the Hokage about it when they returned to the village though. From there they took the closest path towards Tazuna's house, but Kakashi and Naruto's sharp senses alerted of something big coming toward them. Naruto yelled, "Down!" Everyone took a dive on the ground. Sasuke took the client with him. When they regained a footing, they could see a man perched upon a giant sword which was embedded in a tree nearby. The Jonin and ANBU recognized his picture from the bingo book. Zabuza Momochi, who was accurately nicknamed Kurigakure no Kijin, Demon of the Hidden Mist. Zabuza was a tall and noticeably muscular man with pale skin, short spiky black hair, brown eyes, and small eyebrows. He was normally seen wearing bandages like a mask over the bottom half of his face. Under his mask, he had a relatively narrow jawline and jagged teeth, a trait he shared with his fellow swordsmen. He wore his forehead protector sideways on his head. He was seen shirtless, with his chest only covered by a belt to which he attached his kubikiribocho decapitating carving knife, wearing baggy pants with the striped pattern typical of Kurigakure and mimetic wrist warmers extending up to his elbows, with matching leg warmers. From there, the 3 powerful shinobis engaged into banter before going for a one-on-one battle that was Kakashi and Zabuza. Sasuke didn't lose time. Taking control of the squad, he ordered Naruto to shape-shift and to take Tazuna to safety, seeing he was the target. Sakura and he would run along her flanks to cover her. The Jinchūriki accepted the command and took her lion-sized 3-tailed kitsune form. The old bridge builder was sat on her back and they quickly left the scene. When Kakashi found himself into mortal peril once conned into the water prison, Operative Cat decided to bail him out. Showing great prowess with her tanto, she managed to force the Nukenin to free her comrade lest he lose what made him a man. Needless to say, Zabuza learned the hard way that not taking in his surroundings was bad for his health. Once Kakashi returned to the field to finish his fight, and the fight ended her with Zabuza immobilized and taken by a false Kiri Hunter Nin and Kakashi collapsed from chakra exhaustion, Kat shook her head, wondering why her senpai had let himself go lax so much and then ordered, knowing that the genins only took the client out of range, a good idea. Genin Uzumaki, come here and take Jonin Hitaki on your back. Tazuna-san, show us which way to your home. Genin Uchiha, Genin Haruno, in formation around the client. That's an order. Knowing when it was wiser to obey than to shoot their mouths, they obeyed and didn't balk by being called by their last names and ranks. Once everyone was where they were needed, the ANBU operative decided to close the march.